Some temptations enter a room quietly, dressed in innocence, but they leave your soul burning with guilt. Monique sat on the edge of the leather couch, her body aching from another long day, while a ceiling fan above hummed a lazy tune against the sticky summer air. The house was quiet, except for the muffled sound of the TV upstairs, where David, her husband of 12 years, had drifted off to sleep. She leaned forward, pressing her hand into the small of her back, and exhaled sharply. "Lord, this back gonna be the death of me," she muttered, not expecting anyone to hear, but someone did. Desire often wears the face of the one you least expect. From the corner of her eye, she saw Jalen, David's son from his first marriage, standing in the doorway. Shoulders broad, skin still glistening from a post-basketball shower. At 23, he carried the careless confidence of youth, but his gaze lingered too long, too knowingly for her comfort. "You okay, Miss Monique?" he asked, his voice low, warm, and teasing in a way that made her pulse skip. She forced a smile, tried to wave it off. "Just these old bones, baby. They don't sit right no more. The most dangerous sins are wrapped in kindness." Jalen walked over, each step measured, casual on the surface, but heavy with unspoken intent. "You want me to rub it out? I give real good massages, ask my boys." He laughed lightly, trying to keep it playful, but something about the way his eyes swept over her said it wasn't just a joke. Monique hesitated, her mind racing through alarms and excuses, yet her body betrayed her. "Just a little," she said softly, almost convincing herself it was harmless. Every forbidden story begins with the word yes. She shifted forward, giving him room, and his hand settled on her shoulders, firm, warm, steady. At first, it was innocent. His thumbs pressed into the knots, easing tension she didn't even know was there. Her eyes flooded closed, the relief startlingly good. She told herself it was just a back rub, nothing more, but deep down, she knew the line between comfort and danger was already blurring. The silence between them grew thick, charged, the hum of the fan suddenly deafening. When skin lingers too long, the soul begins to tremble. His hand slid lower, fingertips grazing along the curve of her spine. A shiver rippled through her, sharp as lightning on a summer night. She swallowed hard, opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came. Instead, she found herself leaning into his touch, betraying the voice in her head screaming, "Stop!" Jalen leaned closer, his breath brushing the back of her neck, and whispered, "Does that feel better?" The question carried double meaning, and they both knew it. Guilt is sharpest when wrapped in pleasure. "Yes," she whispered, too quick, too breathless. The words slipped out like a secret she'd been dying to tell. Her heart pounded against her ribs, her hands gripping the couch cushions so tight her knuckles whitened. She should have pushed him away, reminded him he was her stepmother, reminded herself she was David's wife. Instead, she sat frozen, suspended in that dangerous space between right and wrong, where everything felt both sinful and necessary. Eyes can confess what lips dare not say. Jalen's hands stilled, but he didn't move them. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned around until his face was level with hers, their eyes locked, hers wide with panic and something else, his smoldering with unspoken challenge. The room seemed to shrink, every sound in the world falling away. In that glance, there was no stepmother, no stepson, only two people standing at the edge of a cliff. Her lips parted, but no words came, and he didn't need them. The silence said everything. The deadliest touch is the one you don't stop. His fingers traced one last path down her back before pulling away, leaving her skin buzzing as though fire still burned there. Monique inhaled sharply, guilt and longing twisting inside her like a storm. She finally found her voice, shaky and thin. "That's enough, Jalen." But even to her own ears, the words sounded weak, unconvincing, more plea than command. He stepped back, a sly half-smile tugging at his lips, eyes glinting with the knowledge that she hadn't really stopped him. The moment ended as quickly as it began. Jalen walked off toward his room, his footsteps echoing through the hall like a countdown she couldn't silence. Monique sat frozen on the couch, one hand pressed to her chest, the other still clutching the cushion. Her skin still hummed with the ghost of his touch. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Jesus, what have I done?" But no prayer could wipe away the truth that something had shifted tonight, something she couldn't undo. Every storm starts with a single drop. Upstairs, David snored softly, oblivious to the spark that had just ignited under his own roof. Monique stared into the dim light of the living room, her body restless, her soul torn. The line between family and lover had been crossed, not with a kiss, not with a confession, but with silence, with permission, with a single dangerous yes. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Some mornings feel heavier, not because of the sunlight, but because of the secrets that didn't sleep. Monique stood at the kitchen counter, her robe tied loosely, a chipped mug of coffee trembling in her hands. The air smelled of toast and yesterday's fried chicken, but even the comfort of familiar scents couldn't settle her nerves. She tried to breathe, to push away the memory of last night, the warmth of Jalen's hands, the burn of his eyes, but it clung to her like smoke. She told herself it was a mistake, a lapse, something to bury deep, but her body wasn't convinced. Guilt tastes bitter, but desire lingers like sugar on the tongue. She lifted the mug to her lips, only to find her hands shaking so badly that the coffee spilled over the rim, scalded in her skin. She hissed, setting it down too quickly, the sound echoing in the still house. She thought she was alone, safe with her thoughts, until she heard the shuffle of bare feet on tile. Jalen entered the kitchen shirtless, his sweatpants hanging low on his hips and hair still damp from the shower. The sight stole the breath from her throat before she could even look away. Every glance, unspoken, is a conversation waiting to happen. "Morning," Jalen said low, his voice rough from sleep but threaded with something that felt intentional. He stretched lazily, arms above his head, muscles flexing in a way that made her chest tighten. She nodded quickly, eyes darting back to her coffee, willing herself to see nothing more than a boy who wasn't hers. "Morning," she managed, her voice cracking, but the silence that followed said more than words ever could. It was loaded, thick, humming with the memory of what they hadn't finished. The smallest touches carry the loudest confessions. Jalen walked past her to the fridge, close enough that the heat of his skin brushed her arm. She froze, pulse thundering, every nerve screaming for distance and craving more at the same time. He pulled out the orange juice, poured himself a glass, and leaned casually against the counter, watching her. Then, as if it was nothing, he brushed his hand across her shoulder, light as air, deliberate as sin. "You sleep okay?" he asked. The question sounded ordinary, but the way he said it felt nothing but. The blush flying into Monique's cheeks was every answer Jalen needed, and the darkness in his eyes deepened, and the line between family and lover was drawn in shades of design that were dark. Temptation is cruel because it hides inside what feels like comfort. Her throat tightened as she nodded, sipping her coffee like it was the only thing keeping her alive. "Fine,"
She lied, though her body betrayed her with every shaky breath. She wanted to snap at him, to remind him who she was, but her tongue felt heavy. Instead, she found herself searching his face, his eyes dark and steady, holding her in a grip she couldn't escape. "Good," he murmured, sipping his juice, his gaze never leaving hers, just making sure. The body always remembers what the mind pretends to forget. The silence stretched again, broken only by the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock. She tried to focus on the mundane, the chipped mug in her hand, the hum of the stove above the stove, but her body betrayed her. Her skin tingled where his hand had brushed her shoulder, her breath uneven, her heart drumming like a warning. She wondered if he could hear it, if he could feel the pull the way she did. And then she knew, because he stepped closer. He leaned down close enough that she could feel the warmth of his breath against her ear. "We both felt that," he whispered, soft, dangerous, undeniable. Her body locked, her coffee mug clattering against the counter as her hands went numb. She opened her mouth, but no words came out, because he was right. She had felt it. She was still feeling it. And the fact that he knew it, that he said it out loud, made her knees weaken with equal parts fear and hunger. Denial dies the moment desire speaks its name. Monique jerked back, forcing space between them, her chest rising and falling like she had just run a marathon. "Don't," she whispered sharply, though the word trembled. Jalen didn't flinch, didn't apologize. Instead, he took a slow sip of juice, eyes locked on hers, as if daring her to deny what they both knew. She gripped the counter until her knuckles turned white, praying for strength that didn't come. And in that moment, she realized she wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of herself. The reflection in the mirror is cruelest when it shows you what you want. Later, when Jalen left the kitchen and the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall, Monique stood alone staring at her reflection in the dark window above the sink. Her face looked the same, her robe the same, the house the same, but she wasn't. Something had shifted last night and again this morning. She whispered into the still air, "Lord, help me." But her voice cracked under the weight of truth. Help wouldn't come, not when the part of her begging for it also prayed that Jalen wouldn't stop. Sometimes the smallest touch can set fire to everything we thought we could control. The evening air was thick with the hum of cicadas, but Marcus barely noticed as he leaned against the hood of his old Chevy down the block. "Waiting for a woman you shouldn't be thinking about makes every second feel like sin," he muttered to himself. The house lights flickered on, and there she was, Naomi, her silhouette framed against the doorway like temptation wrapped in summer heat. She waved him closer, her nervous glance darting around the street as though the whole world was already watching. The moment you sneak into forbidden spaces, you know you've already crossed the line. Marcus followed Naomi inside, his sneakers brushing across the wooden floor that groaned like an accomplice keeping their secret. The scent of lavender filled the living room, clashing with the thunder in his chest. She closed the door behind them, her hands trembling, though not from fear. "I shouldn't have called you, Marcus," she whispered, her voice cracking like brittle glass. But Marcus could see the truth in her eyes. She had wanted this as much as he did. A desire denied too long can drown reason, he thought, fighting the urge to close the distance between them. Every forbidden secret has a moment when silence turns into confession. Naomi paced, clutching the hem of her silk robe as if it were a shield. "I feel trapped, Marcus," she confessed, her words heavy like stones falling into water. "Sterling's love is complicated. He provides, but he owns every piece of me. I don't even know who I am anymore." Her voice quivered, but her eyes burned with something deeper, longing, rage, freedom. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. "You don't belong in a cage, Naomi, and I can't pretend I don't feel something when I'm near you." Her lips parted and the silence between them became louder than thunder. One kiss can become the crime of a lifetime. It happened faster than either of them could stop. Marcus stepped forward and Naomi didn't move back. Her breath hitched, her fingers brushing his arm like lightning sparking dry wood. When their lips finally met, the world outside collapsed. Time, rules, and consequences vanished into a kiss that was both salvation and betrayal. Her body leaned into his, trembling not from fear, but from release. Once you taste fire, going back to ashes feels impossible, Naomi realized, her hands tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer despite every voice in her head screaming to stop. The danger of love isn't the fall, it's how easy it feels to let go. Their kiss broke with a gasp, both of them staring at each other like fugitives caught in their own crime. Naomi's robe slipped off her shoulder, revealing the smooth curve of skin that Marcus's chest tightened with guilt and hunger. "If Sterling ever found out," she whispered, eyes darting toward the window as if her husband's shadow lurked outside. Marcus clenched his fist, fighting the battle between conscience and craving. "Then he'll never find out," he said low. "Dangerous." Naomi hesitated, then nodded. The weight of her choice settled on her like chains she had just willingly fastened. Every forbidden love story needs a witness, and sometimes the witness is fate itself. The sound of footsteps echoed outside, slow, heavy, deliberate. Naomi froze, eyes wide, her face draining of color. Marcus turned sharply, adrenaline spiking like lightning in his veins. The doorknob rattled once, then stopped. Silence. The two of them stood motionless, barely breathing, knowing that discovery would mean ruin. When the footsteps finally faded into the night, Naomi collapsed against Marcus's chest, her body shaking, his heart pounding like a war drum. But deep inside, a terrifying truth settled over him. This wasn't a mistake anymore. It was a beginning.
Secrets don't whisper forever. Sooner or later, they scream. The morning sun painted Naomi's kitchen in soft gold, but the glow did nothing to ease the storm inside her chest. She sat at the table, untouched coffee cooling in her hands, while Marcus leaned against the counter, his eyes tracing every flicker of her restless movements. The silence between them was heavy, weighted with the memory of their kiss. "We crossed the line," she finally said, her voice brittle like glass about to shatter. But Marcus only shook his head slowly, his gaze dark, unwavering. "No, Naomi, we found the truth we've been running from." The most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves. Naomi looked away, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Sterling isn't just my husband. He's power, reputation, control. If he even suspects something—" Her words trailed off. The Marcus stepped closer, closing the distance until his shadow fell over her. "Then don't let him suspect," he said firmly. His tone was protective, but his eyes burned with something reckless. Naomi's breath caught because deep down she knew Marcus wasn't just defying Sterling, he was daring fate itself. Love becomes most intoxicating when it feels like war. Their hands brushed as Marcus reached for hers, the electricity undeniable, making Naomi's pulse race. She wanted to pull away, to remind herself of loyalty and vows, but instead she tightened her grip. The kitchen walls seemed to close in, trapping them in a private battlefield of desire and guilt. "You're too young to understand what this could cost," she whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the window. Marcus lifted her chin with a gentle but unshakable touch. "Age doesn't measure love, Naomi. Courage does." His words landed like fire, igniting something in her that had been buried for years. Every hidden romance breeds a ghost waiting to haunt it. The sound of a phone buzzing on the counter shattered the fragile moment. Naomi's heart lurched as she glanced at the screen. Sterling's name flashed like a warning siren. Her fingers hovered, frozen, before finally swiping to answer. "Hello?" Her voice was strained, forced calm. Sterling's deep baritone filled the kitchen, casual but commanding. He was calling from his office downtown, asking about dinner plans, about her day, about little details that suddenly felt like interrogation. Naomi forced a smile into her tone, her free hand gripping Marcus's wrist under the table like a lifeline. When she hung up, her knees nearly gave out. The walls of deceit grow taller with every brick we lay. Marcus caught her before she collapsed, holding her against him, his chest firm, steady. Naomi clutched him tightly, eyes shut, her heartbeat hammering against his. "I can't live like this," she confessed, her voice breaking. "But I can't stop either." Marcus pressed his forehead against hers, his breath warm, his words low. "Then don't stop. Don't deny yourself anymore." For the first time in years, she felt seen, desired, not as Sterling's possession, but as Naomi, the woman beneath the perfection. Yet deep inside, fear twisted around her like a serpent. How long before Sterling noticed the cracks? The closer love burns, the darker the shadows it casts. Later that evening, Naomi watched Sterling across the dinner table. He was polished as always, sipping wine, discussing business deals, exuding dominance without effort. Yet every word, every glance made Naomi ache with guilt. Marcus's touch lingered on her skin like an invisible brand, and Sterling's presence only sharpened the contrast. "You seem distracted tonight," he observed coolly, his sharp eyes narrowing. Naomi's fork clattered against her plate, and she forced a smile into her tone. "Just tired," she lied, but in that moment, she knew. Sterling wasn't fooled easily, and suspicion had already planted its seed. Suspicion is a poison that spreads quietly, then strikes without warning. Sterling's eyes lingered on Naomi longer than usual as he pushed back from the dinner table. His polished smile never wavered, but Naomi felt the weight of his gaze pressing into her bones. She excused herself to clear the plates, her hands trembling against the fine china. In the kitchen, Marcus moved silently to help, his presence both a comfort and a risk. When their fingers brushed over a fork, Naomi jerked back, fear rippling through her. Sterling was watching. She could feel it, even through the walls. A liar's heart beats louder when silence falls. As Naomi stacked dishes in the sink, Sterling appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed. His voice was smooth, casual, but there was an edge sharp enough to cut. "Funny," he said slowly, "how my son spends so much time in this kitchen lately. Almost like he's found a new hobby." Naomi froze, her back to him, the sound of running water masking the thundering of her pulse. She forced a laugh, brittle and weak. "He's just helping out more, that's all." Sterling's silence stretched long and dangerous. When truth hides, every gesture becomes a clue. Marcus straightened, meeting his father's eyes with quiet defiance. The tension between them was palpable. Father and son locked in a wordless duel with Naomi caught in the crossfire. "I like helping her," Marcus said evenly, his tone steady but his jaw tight. Sterling's gaze flickered between them, the corner of his mouth twitching into something that wasn't quite a smile. Naomi's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to drag Marcus away, but her voice failed her. The kitchen felt smaller, hotter, like the air itself had turned against her. The moment of danger isn't when the lie is told, but when it's almost discovered. Breaking the silence, Sterling finally chuckled, low and unnerving. "Well," he said, "it's good to see you stepping up, son. Your mama would have been proud." The words dripped with calculated warmth, but Naomi's stomach knotted. Something in his tone told her he wasn't convinced at all, just biding his time, watching for the slip that would confirm his suspicions. When Sterling finally left the kitchen, his footsteps heavy down the hall, Naomi slumped against the counter, her breath shallow. Marcus moved closer, whispering, "He knows." Naomi nodded, terror flashing in her eyes. Forbidden love shines brightest when danger sharpens its edges. That night, Naomi lay awake beside Sterling, her body rigid, her mind replaying every glance, every word, every unguarded moment she and Marcus had shared. Sterling's steady breathing beside her felt like the ticking of a bomb, silent now, but bound to explode. Across the hall, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed, fists clenched, knowing their secret couldn't stay buried much longer. Naomi stared at the ceiling in the dark, one thought echoing louder than the rest. The crack has formed, and sooner or later, everything will break.
The deadliest questions are the ones wrapped in a smile. The next morning, Naomi came downstairs to find Sterling already seated at the dining table, a newspaper spread before him and coffee steaming in his hand. His smile was practiced, calm, but his eyes glinted with a sharpness that made Naomi's stomach churn. "Sleep well?" he asked casually, folding the paper. Naomi forced a nod, smoothing the silk of her robe against trembling hands. Sterling leaned back in his chair. "Good, because tonight I'm hosting a dinner, just family. You, me, Marcus." His voice dripped with calculated sweetness, but Naomi heard the trap hiding in it. Control is never given. It is tested, squeezed, and broken. Marcus entered the room moments later, and Sterling's gaze shifted like a hawk circling prey. "Morning, son," he said, his tone oddly warm. "You'll be home tonight, right? I want the three of us to sit down, talk, bond." Marcus hesitated, his jaw tightening before he muttered, "Yeah, sure." Sterling's smile widened, satisfied. Naomi felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't a family dinner. This was a battlefield disguised as one. Love feels most dangerous when it's played under a spotlight. That evening, the dining room glowed with soft light, crystal glasses sparkling, the aroma of roasted lamb filling the air. Sterling carved the meat with practiced elegance, pouring wine into each glass. He asked Marcus about his job, about his plans, about his friendships. Each question seemed innocent, but Naomi could feel the weight beneath every syllable. Marcus answered carefully, his eyes occasionally flicking to her, a silent reassurance, a silent warning. Naomi's hand shook as she lifted her glass, the wine burning like fire down her throat. The predator reveals himself by how long he enjoys the silence. At one point, Sterling set down his fork, leaning back with that unreadable smile. You know, Naomi, trust is the foundation of this family. Without it, everything falls apart. His gaze swept from Marcus to Naomi, pinning them both like butterflies to a board. Naomi forced the laugh. Of course, but her voice cracked, betraying her. Marcus's fists clenched beneath the table. The room suddenly felt suffocating. The chandeliers glowed too bright, every tick of the grandfather clock like a drumbeat of doom. Some battles are fought without swords, only stares and secrets. The meal ended with Sterling standing to pour himself another glass of wine, his smile never faltering. I'm glad we did this, he said smoothly. Family should always be close. The pause before that last word cut Naomi like a blade. When he left the room, the clink of his glass fading down the hall, Naomi slumped in her chair, her hands trembling violently. Marcus leaned forward, whispering, He's not asking questions anymore. He's hunting. Naomi's eyes filled with tears because in her gut, she knew Marcus was right. Some men don't ask for the truth. They build cages and wait for it to walk in. Naomi felt it the moment she entered the living room. Something was wrong. Sterling sat on the leather sofa, his suit jacket draped neatly on the armrest, a tumbler of whiskey glowing amber in his hand. His smile was practiced, calm, but his eyes ignited with a sharpness that made Naomi's stomach churn. Come sit, he said softly, gesturing to the seat across from him. Naomi's stomach knotted as she lowered herself down, the weight of his stare pressing into her. Every nerve screamed that tonight was not like the others. A secret feels safest in the dark, until someone turns on the light. Sterling swirled the whiskey, his smile slow and deliberate. You know, Naomi, marriage is built on loyalty. A husband should be able to trust his wife, just as a father should be able to trust his son. Her breath caught, her palms damp. Before she could form a reply, Sterling lifted a sleek black phone from the table. With one click, the screen lit up, showing blurred still images from the security cameras he'd installed weeks ago. One frame froze Naomi's world. Her in the kitchen, Marcus's hand brushing against hers. Betrayal tastes bitterest when it's served by someone you never saw watching. Naomi's blood turned cold. Sterling, she stammered, but he cut her off with a sharp raise of his hand. Don't insult me with lies, he snapped, his voice no longer smooth but seething, a storm barely contained. His eyes burned as he leaned forward. My own wife, my own son. Do you know what kind of humiliation that brings a man like me? His tone dripped with venom, but beneath it was something far more terrifying. Calm calculation. Naomi's heart pounded against her ribs. He wasn't just angry. He was planning. The real danger begins not when you're caught, but when you don't know the punishment. Footsteps sounded on the staircase, and Marcus appeared, freezing at the sight of Sterling holding the phone. His jaw clenched, his chest rising and falling as though bracing for a fight. Sterling's gaze shifted between them like a predator circling prey. Perfect. Now both of you can explain yourselves. Naomi's voice broke as she tried to speak, but Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and low. Don't blame her. This was me. The confession landed heavy, slicing the air in two. Sterling's expression didn't flicker, but his grip on the glass tightened until it cracked. Have you ever kept a secret so big it could destroy everything? Share your thoughts below and tell me what city or country you're watching from. I love seeing our story family from all over the world. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next emotional twist in our journey.
Every forbidden love eventually demands a price. The room pulsed with silence, thick and dangerous. Naomi's tears spilled freely, her hands trembling as Marcus positioned himself slightly in front of her, shielding her like a soldier before battle. Sterling rose slowly, placing the shattered glass on the table, his voice calm, almost too calm. "You think you're a man, Marcus? You think you can steal from me? My blood, my name, my wife?" His words dripped with fury, restrained only by pride. Naomi's chest heaved with sobs, torn between fear of losing Marcus and terror of what Sterling was capable of doing. The storm had finally broken, and nothing would ever be the same. Some endings aren't written in words. They're carved in blood, silence, and shattered trust. The room was a battlefield, charged with electricity so sharp it could cut skin. Sterling stood tall, looming like a shadow that swallowed both Naomi and Marcus whole. His eyes flickered with a fury that burned hotter than fire, but colder than ice. "I gave you everything," he snapped, his voice breaking for the first time. "And you spit in my face." Naomi's breath caught in her throat, her body trembling as she clutched Marcus's arm. She opened her mouth to speak, but Marcus's steady hand kept her silent. The weight of truth was already heavy enough to crush them both. Every forbidden love is a gamble, and tonight the house came to collect. Sterling paced, his polished shoes striking the hardwood like the tick of a clock counting down to destruction. "You think you found love," he said, his voice bitter with disbelief. "No, you found ruin, both of you." He turned suddenly, eyes narrowing on Marcus. "Son, you've betrayed your blood. You've betrayed me, and for what? A woman who belongs to me?" His words cracked like a whip, but Marcus stood unflinching, his jaw clenched. "She doesn't belong to anyone," he said firmly. "She's not your possession. She's Naomi, and I love her." Naomi gasped, her tears falling faster. Sterling's hand trembled as if fighting the urge to strike, but instead he let out a hollow laugh, low and broken. "Love," he mocked. "You call this love? This is betrayal dressed up in stolen moments." His laughter died, replaced with a deadly calm. He pulled a small pistol from the drawer by the sofa, placing it on the table with deliberate slowness. Naomi's scream tore from her throat, but Sterling raised his hand, silencing her. No games tonight, only choices. The metallic glint under the light was enough to steal the air from her lungs. Sometimes love demands a sacrifice no one is ready to pay. Marcus stepped forward, shielding Naomi with his body, his voice unwavering. "If you want blood, take mine, but leave her out of this." Naomi clutched his arm, shaking her head violently. "No, Marcus, please." Sterling's eyes darkened as he stared at them, his own son and his wife locked together against him. For a moment, time froze, the silence so heavy it roared in Naomi's ears. Then Sterling exhaled sharply, his shoulders slumping under the weight of betrayal too great to bear. He pushed the pistol aside, the clatter echoing like a final verdict. "Get out," he said coldly. "Both of you. You're dead to me." Naomi collapsed into tears, Marcus wrapping his arms around her as Sterling turned his back, staring into the flames of the fireplace like a man watching his whole life burn. They left that night with nothing but each other. No money, no home, no safety. Yet, in the bitter chill of the night air, Naomi clung to Marcus, knowing their love had cost them everything. Every forbidden romance ends the same way, scarred, shaken, but unforgettable. As the door slammed behind them, Sterling sank into the silence of his mansion, his empire intact, but his family shattered. Naomi and Marcus walked into the unknown, bound by passion, guilt, and a love too wild to cage. The world ahead promised struggle, judgment, and pain. But Naomi's heart whispered the truth she could no longer deny. She was alive again, even if it meant living in the ruins of everything she once knew. What would you do if you were in Naomi's shoes? Walk away or give in to the fire? Let me know in the comments and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from?